Hey there, welcome to another episode of the Coffee Solo audio program. I am your host, Dan Hugo. We are recording this on, if I can speak, at 9:38 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time here in the Greater Vegas area on Thursday, April 2nd, 2026. Continued effort to move things around a little bit so I don't record these programs only on Saturday, usually. But that date combination does make this episode 2026 040201. How about that? The title, which I have selected, I only created a bullet list of items. I didn't really write so much out. So hopefully I can swing back into more spontaneous conversation. Talking to myself. I go there anyway. So even if I write stuff out for this program, I do definitely wander around a little bit, so I'm not constraining myself nor the episode to a particular focus. And as I've mentioned before, the title is based on like the thing that I want to talk about. If there's no title, that means I don't have any particular thing in mind. But today, in the abstract, the point of this program is to have no particular schedule, no particular agenda, no particular focus area, no constraints. We can talk about politics or whatever, if that's worth time anymore. And this may or may not be relevant to you. The first episode I just looked was on April 20th, 2025. So we're coming up on 1 year, which means season 0 is about to flip over to season 1. Isn't that exciting? With the weekly shows, it's just a year. So 52 episodes next season. Is there a reason to do that? No, not really. It's interesting to see how many episodes are flowing through me. But just a little fun fact, I suppose. In the abstract, the intent is to, concrete versus abstract. We'll get into that. Hopefully, wherever you found this audio program, maybe on Ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/danhugo/posts, but probably not. But I don't know. They don't really give a real number about who listens to audio programs like this. But also, that's why these programs are no longer exclusive to the Ko-fi.com platform, which is how they got started and where the name came from. Now available on the usual places. And then wherever else podcasts scrape and integrate into their own channel selections. The nature of podcasting. Hopefully wherever you found this audio program, you're able to locate the episode description, which contains the show notes. I say exactly the same thing for all of my programs. There is a summary, which I'll read to you, and the links are the usual links. I'm still on the fence about whether I should include links. I probably should. But the whole idea about being, I'm not going to say spontaneous, but not quite so planned out, is that, providing a collection of links is a little strange. I think, if this were to be a live streamed audio program, which I don't even know if people do those anymore, like a radio call-in show, Coffee Solo After Dark, there might be some chat server or some way of interacting with people in real time. And then, as links accumulate, that could be interesting, I suppose. There is still the video live stream channel that I have on a back burner somewhere. The reason it's on a back burner is the getting the word out about anything in Greater Vegas is very nearly impossible. It's not even worthwhile to try using LinkedIn, or if you don't have a following in social media, then you're kind of out of luck. And this is normal. This is not a Vegas only thing. But if you want a good example, check out Vegas. I haven't really talked about this here, I don't think. The Smarter Smart City Challenge is on the table for the Innovate for Vegas Foundations to invite people of Greater Vegas and beyond to participate in a, sort of making things better, to point your creative energies back into where you live, where you spend your time. So because there is a huge focus here in Vegas and elsewhere, anywhere there's a a drive towards entrepreneurialism or an attempt to grow a small business community. I don't like that word. It gets used too often. But, there's always a what do you call it? Small Business Administration collection of services, SCORE, SBDC, the possibility of SBA loans for debt financing, and so on. So there's always this like small businesses are like the number one employer in aggregate, right? So if you have I can't remember if it's, I got to check this one of these days because I keep saying I don't remember. I did check one time to compare, it was either Nevada or Southern Nevada, against the national rate of approximately 80% of small businesses have no employees. So it's similar in Nevada, but I think at the same time, small businesses create work for other people, either as outsourced, contract, service interface sort of things like, oh, I don't have to hire someone. I'll just pay an external vendor to design my website or create my logo or do my bookkeeping and things like that. So you don't have to actually have employees to be a proactive part of the local economy. So I think that's kind of interesting in general. That's probably an entire episode, or certainly something to survey people about in the rolling introspective. So anyway, the ecosystem in Greater Vegas for a brief period was trying to lean into startups, but my senses, and based on like what people talk about on LinkedIn, the people I'm following now, I am connected to the new CEO of the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance, which is a public-private partnership entity that's driving economic development for Southern Nevada. So they used to sort of tout the entrepreneurial ecosystem and the startup scene and all this silliness. And that's really fallen back maybe to a back burner. So they're really focusing on key industries, more established companies, and so on. I don't know how that's going to go over. We will find out over time. But yeah, so I'm planning to do an episode of Cafe Genius Impresarios for tomorrow, for the 3rd of April. So I haven't really started. I have it kind of mentally written, but I need to get a couple of, in that case, some references. And the K-shaped Vegas, right? So there's where there was for a brief time, and of course there's a downtown project, was a specific focus on startups and small business in a geographical, like a bounded region, the downtown project. That was an interesting time, but now post-pandemic, my sense is there was a brief experiment with like, oh, maybe we should build, quote unquote build. I don't think you really can build, but maybe we should try to build an ecosystem for entrepreneurialism and try to push the startup scene, the startup communities, all these other words that people use carelessly here in Southern Nevada. And I think in the last year or so, that has sort of ebbed. So now I think there's much more focus on established companies. There's a lot of glad handing around sporting events like the Super Bowl or the Formula One races, where they really focus on executives like, hey, you should move your company here. Look at how much fun everybody's having, which is counterintuitive, I think. Like, look how much distraction there is here for your workers if they should choose to move here. And nobody talks about gentrification, which would be a real problem, and all this stuff. So, and I still haven't gotten to the show notes. So all this is unprepared, spontaneous ideation. So yeah, show notes. The summary for today's coffee solo. We live in a modernity overflowing with data, and yet we too often consume arguments and assertions based on anecdote or familiarity with abstract claims rather than concrete references, which I'm doing here today because I don't have any links to point people to, and some other stuff. We'll talk about some other things as well. The links for the program, as usual, if you are listening to this via Ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com. I say Ko-fi because it's not spelled with a C and 2 F's and 2 E's. So it's very clearly a play on coffee. I don't know if you've ever seen The Wonders the Oneaters. There's there's a line that I invented apparently, which it was not in the actual movie because I have looked, but maybe it was like an excerpt, like a trailer or a clip that was removed from the movie. So maybe I saw it on YouTube somewhere. I don't know. I cannot explain it. But Tom Hanks is the agent, or the record, not the agent, the sort of record producer person, works for a record company. So whatever his specific job title is. So he finds the Wonders, and they spell their band name Oneders, the Wonders. And the guy that's, the founder of the band, the lead singer, he's like, the Wonders, and he holds up his index finger. And Tom Hanks is like, yeah, I don't know about this. We got to change that spelling. He's like, no, it's the Wonders, like the Beatles, with B-E-A-T, Beatles. And he goes, yeah, you're not the Beatles. But that was not in the movie. But that is, maybe they took it out because he was supposed to be very positive, and that sounds sort of condescending. But yeah, you're not the Beatles. That always made me laugh. So I wish it was in the movie. So yeah, specifics. Anyway, Ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/danhugo/post. So if you're not listening to this there, that is where I publish this show first. Each episode is published there first. And then, depending on if it's like midnight or something, then it doesn't really matter as much. But I'll try to post it about 2 hours later, scheduled on Spotify for creators, which then publishes it through RSS feeds to Apple, Amazon, Spotify, of course, YouTube. And YouTube is still very proactively marking new submissions that it pulls from RSS feeds as private. A small amount of time after, like 2-3 hours later, it will mark a public video post from your podcast feed as private. So it will just disappear, and you got to go and mark it as public. So I keep talking about this, and today I think it marked an episode from Quaggling Sand. It marked it private 3 times through the day, which is ridiculous. So I have it in mind, much like this program. I haven't written it out yet, but I have it in mind how I would use Playwright, which is a website automation framework from Microsoft. So use Playwright to build a quick little automation that visits the studio content dashboard. You can actually build the URL with a filter. So show me any private videos, use the user interface of the web page to mark them as public, then go and this is an odd little feature. I go, because it's a podcast, so I go to the podcast dashboard section as opposed to the video content dashboard, which lists the actual videos that YouTube has converted. It converts an audio into a single frame video, so it's watchable on YouTube. And so when it marks it as private, it breaks the sort order. So it puts the new episode as though it were, I think it treats it as like, not date added, but anyway, so it appears last in the sort order when all the other episodes are based on date of publication. So it just goes, oh, let's just stick the published episode from today. We'll put it at the bottom. So the top of the sort list is the previous episode, and the current newest episode is placed after. So whatever. And I think I've mentioned this before. I've seen people mention this on Reddit from coming up on a year ago. And they're like, YouTube, when you try to reach out to YouTube, they're like, yeah, we're not going to fix that. Sorry. Not important. Which is the way the world works now. So I have a strategy to fix that, and I should really buckle down and just do it. I've gotten really, really good at procrastination lately, or what I like to call thrashing on interrupts. So I have a ton of things to do, and instead of trying to pick one and slog through it and complete it, I say, oh, I got to work on this, but I got to work on this first, and then I got to do that first. And so I kind of talk myself out of being as productive as I could be. So that is a bad habit. Very bad. The second link, the Coffee Solo program, appears through the Spotify player, the most recent episode, which does not get marked as private on Spotify. The most recent episode appears on danhugo.com, which is my personal vanity website. That's all that's on there right now. Coffee Solo and Buy Me an Update. So speaking of procrastination, I really need to make my various personal properties for the audio program productions. They need to be primary point of publication, so they need to look nice. They need to be functional. I really want FFS Talk to enable people to either comment or say, hey, I want to come and argue with you about this or talk about that or whatever. So there are various things that are on my menu of things I would like to accomplish. And again, I keep talking myself out of being truly productive. So, because I'm dumb, maybe. So yeah, Coffee Solo, the homepage is officially danhugo.com. Why is there not a domain for Coffee Solo? Because I came up with Coffee Solo just because I figured, well, I've had Buy Me a Coffee and Coffee Solo for 5 years. It was 5 years last month, March sometime. So we're, 5 years and 2 days now or whatever, something like that. So I figured I should use this platform for something. So it's not just something I mention and then that's it. And in fact, Coffee Solo, Ko-fi.com does not really offer the freeform profile possibilities that Buy Me a Coffee does. So I was like, should I even keep this? I don't know. But I figured, it's another vector that points back to the stuff I'm working on. So, I could keep it. So why not? So it remains 5 years and 2 days later. So I do publish the episodes there first, and then usually about 2 hours later, give or take, they publish on Spotify for creators, and then that's where it ends up in the other usual places. And if you're curious to know where those other usual places are, the profile page linking everything is at buymeacoffee.com/danhugo. Again, 5 years. So that's a freeform profile page that I don't need to maintain. So it can just be broken and horrible, which the buymeacoffee.com editor is for editing that page. And there's some other things that are kind of annoying about it, but it's a well-known platform. It's functional. They worry about keeping it functional and making sure it's still working. I don't really do this for submissions of payment. So I don't really have sponsors. I don't really have, join my Patreon. I don't have a tip jar. So that's the closest I get to the tip jar. But I always tell people you don't have to pay for anything. So this is purely my own effort. Why am I doing all this podcasting? I'll give you 2 reasons. One, it's always good to practice writing. So when I write out the shows, there's always something to say. And, social media is such a noisy, crowded space, but so is podcasting. But there's always, you can create your YouTube video or your audio program, your podcast, publish it wherever. You now have a receipt of sorts. So if sometime later somebody says, oh, you've been saying this, or hey, I did a show about this 1.5 years ago. Here it is. Give it a listen. There's always the chance that somebody will change their views, but you can see the receipts, right? So if I change my opinion on bananas, for example, I do not like bananas. But if someday in the near future I say, well, plantains are not so bad. Oh, you said you didn't like bananas. Then I would say, well, I did say that about bananas. Plantains and bananas are related, but they're not the same. Plantains taste different, right? And then maybe later I'll say, you know what? I actually don't mind bananas, but as a fried bananas, Thai style fried bananas, those are not as bad, which is also true. So over time, if an opinion or a thought or a concept evolves, it's nice to have a receipt to point to, right? I think in today's world of finger pointing. So they're good for that. And then the other reason is because I really don't talk to people as much, which is why I keep talking about like doing interactive streams and having comments, or the debate format for, not really a debate, but more of a discussion, a conversational format. Possibly adversarial if we disagree going in, but that's what FFS Talk is supposed to be, is what works, what doesn't, and what we might do about it. And so I have 123, I think it is, episodes of just me talking, monologue. So I just say, I'm planting seeds of future conversation. But here again, with the receipts, these are, you can look up my views on a variety of topics. Contemporaneous views, they're always subject to change. And that's what the conversation part is, right? Like we may have a conversation about a topic I talked about in episode 3. And today, if that were to happen, I might say, "Yo, you know what? I never really thought about that," because it was just me talking. It wasn't hearing from someone with an actual interest in whatever the topic was. So that's the idea. So yeah, still haven't gotten to the outline that I created, but we should get there right now. So as I mentioned, the title in the abstract. So do you watch the news? I hope not. You have my sympathies if you do. There's a ton of stuff going on in the world. A lot of it doesn't make sense anymore because we've let everything get away from us, people, especially people in the United States. So we let news reporting and politicians and, for example, I will say, I don't really want to talk about the war of choice in Iran and all that because there's just a ton of things we don't know. But something I keep hearing, this is not a great example, but it is something I keep hearing. The goals have not been specified. Nobody has said what the plan is, etc. And then, you look at the characters involved. Pete Hegseth. I don't know if a Secretary of Defense should be a Pete, right? That's serious business. I think Secretary of State, Marco, is that his full name? I don't know. But, Secretary of Defense, that's Pete. Like, really? Pete? Like Donald Rumsfeld sounded like somebody who's going to be serious, whether you like Donald or not. I think he has one good quote about the known unknowns and all that. But, and then his other one, which is sort of morose, but it was something like, and this actually may have been, what's the guy on Saturday Night Live that Daryl Hammond used to do an impression of Donald Rumsfeld. So this might actually be sort of like the governor of Alaska. Her name is totally escaping me. She never said she could see Moscow or see Russia from her house, whatever. That was, why am I spacing on names right now? That was on Saturday Night Live also. Tina Fey. So Tina Fey doing her impression of, is her name going to come to me also? No. Former Governor Alaska. Sarah Palin. Thank you. Why did I not remember that? So she never said that. That was a Tina Fey thing. So I think it was Daryl Hammond doing Donald Rumsfeld where he says, during the Gulf War in Iraq, there are suicide bombers that keep running away. They keep ducking. And why do they keep ducking? Like they should. We're trying to help them complete their act. That was a horrible version of it, but these abstractions and these I think comedians are part of the problem actually, and I love comedians, but comedians will present an abstraction of something. They will talk about it. There could be any range of knowledgeable, insightful, right? Jon Stewart probably has done some reading. Theo Vaughn probably has not done some reading. So when they speak, people can either take them as comedians making comments, doing bits, or they will take them as insightful philosophers. Like, I always get my news from Theo Vaughn, and you're like, well, obviously. But these are not people that are constructing a meaningful analysis of a particular situation. They're constructing a humorous analysis that is a bit, so that people will go, oh, that was really funny. Because when you make people laugh, their endorphins come out and they feel good and they're like, oh, I love that Theo Vaughn. He's always so insightful. But really, you're keeping things abstract, right? You're talking about things that like, oh, everybody knows this about some topic. And it's like, well, we only know what people have talked about in the abstract, so nobody actually knows. Like, if somebody said, oh, now they're going through the Red Sea to move some oil because the Strait of Hormuz is blocked. It's being held hostage in a way by Iran. And then someone might say, well, I don't even know where, are those two things the same thing? So a lot of times people will speak of these abstract concepts that especially in the United States, people have no idea what the spatial relationship is between the Red Sea and the Suez Canal and the Strait of Hormuz, the Persian Gulf. These things, they are news headlines and they are things that people argue about, but it's not so common that people will take the time to figure out where they are geographically, how they're related spatially, the history of these places. Like, take our president, for example. He did none of those things, obviously. But so the topic of the day, usually, because the Epstein files are backburnered for the moment, they'll come back. But oh, he went to war without a plan, which is probably true. Pete, what's the plan? I don't know, man. Shots. So, but he does keep saying what his goals were. Having goals is not the same as having a plan, but the similar argument is, oh, there was no plan. Why are we there? He keeps saying it. We don't want them to have nuclear weapons. But how close were they to having nuclear weapons because of the obliterated statements from last summer? So all these things are spoken about in hand wave terms. I've talked about this a lot in modernity. We still report news and talk about news and consume news as though it were in print. So the inverted pyramid, you got to have a catchy headline, something sensational, so that you'll like, ooh, what's this? Clickbait, right? And in the modern times, it's literally clickbait. Back in the day, it was just to get you to buy the newspaper, the big headline, the masthead, and then the big headline under it. Like, ooh, what does the Washington Post have to say about war in the Persian Gulf, right? So then, because we consume news as though it were in a newspaper, we aren't taking advantage of the tools at our disposal. So, Google Maps. Oh, I just use that to figure out if there's traffic on my way to work. Yeah, but you can also use Google Maps or Apple Maps or any variety of these tools and platforms. You can use Google Earth, and there's Celsius tools, and so there's all kinds of stuff that's built around mapping, displaying things on maps. And little do people know that data formats like KML, which is a keyhole markup language that Google bought decades ago, KML supports ordered timestamp things, so you could actually animate things on a map using KML. And back in the day, you could display KML in Google Maps. That was a very cool feature that I used for food trucks. They stopped supporting that, but you can view KML files on Google Earth. So that's like a simple way to author spatial presentations where you display things like regions and map markers, pins, right, on the Earth, and you can see those spatial relationships. So really, if you're going to talk about routing of oil tankers and other such things, trying to get through the Red Sea or the Persian Gulf out into the world, and then who's attacking whom and where the choke points are and all that, you can actually create a Google Earth view that anyone can consume using these simple tools, simple in quotes, but they're not that hard actually. And you can say, here's where this is, here's where that is, and on this date this happened, and this is where this was blocked, and you can highlight with a what do you call it, a polygon, I think, just a polygon. So it's a polygon object, and you say, here's the bounding box for the polygon, and make it red, blue, whatever. And you can put a descriptive, like a balloon, like if you tap on it or touch it or click on it, maybe a little info window will pop up, like, this is where this happened. You can animate things so you can see things developing over time. These are all tools that are available. You could have actual concrete timeline, specific locations, relationships between time and place of different things, and how this correlates with policy or announcements or price increases or decreases. So all of these things are possible, but what we end up with is these abstractions where, the old Red Sea thing and the Houthis, but people rarely will, some websites will actually provide references. Like, who are the Houthis? People talk about Hezbollah and Hamas as though they're all the same, right? They're all them. But there are specific goals of these organizations. Some people are serious about the political change. Other people have sort of taken over and made them more about violence. So They always talk about the political arm of Hamas or Hezbollah versus the militant or terrorist arm. But understanding these things enables people to make better decisions about how they feel or their views on things if they choose to do that. And most people don't choose to do that, so they accept the abstractions and then they say, "Oh, them," right? Like if you ask someone what's the difference between a Houthi, a Hamas, and a Hezbollah person, is the first question going to be, you mean the militant part or the political part? Are you going to say like Hamas was voted into some sort of governance role in the Gaza Strip, I think it is, and what does that really mean? Oh, they were elected. Well, things don't always go as well as planned when you vote for something. And the last time Hamas held elections was 10 years ago or something. So, yeah, just because people voted didn't mean they knew what they were voting for, nor did they know that things were going to change drastically, right? Campaign promises mean nothing nowadays. It's kind of a disappointment. So, yeah, abstraction. And same with, speaking about AI, everybody always talks about ChatGPT. Because the casual person really only knows about ChatGPT. They don't have any idea what DeepSeek and Llama. They don't know what is Perplexity and Cursor and Copilot and Claude with what do you call it? Cowork and Opus and what's this new, the Mythos thing and the what is it? Canberra? No. Cadbury? No. There's another model coming out. So there's all these names and they try to use human names for some reason. So there's a lot of stuff to keep track of. So most news reporting, unless it's a particularly technologically focused presentation, is going to simplify everything down to ChatGPT and make that the sort of the virtual abstraction of use of generative AI to undo the world. And for better or worse. But there's just all kinds of things, which I'm going to mention in a moment about the impact of all these things. And the explanations are a lot of hand waving. So we'll get to that in a second. But before that, the thing that I really think should be addressed more, talked about more, should be more of a conversation is the left-right question versus the bottom-top question. So political parties are completely broken. I personally think who is the best president? Abraham Lincoln. It's like, well, there was a couple of problems with Abraham Lincoln between the beginning and end of his term, and I don't mean how it ended, but his views on things and the formation of the Republican Party was a third party or not. It was not one of the two. Was it the Whigs that gave way to the Republican Party, I think it was. So everybody always thinks, because of the abstraction, like, oh, Abraham Lincoln did all these things to undo the what do they call it, the original sin of slavery. Yeah, the UK actually led the way on undoing that on a global scale. They had a lot of reach back then, but yeah, America was kind of late to the party, and they really made a big thing of it. And really, I watched this interesting, heavily opinionated presentation on how the thing that really led to slavery, which I'm not a fan of, slavery came to an end because it became cheaper to hire people as employees rather than chattel slavery, which is not good. Didn't start in America, has been around forever, and is still around in some places. So that's not good. But when it became, you can make the same arguments with most things, right? Like, oh, we have an oil shortage, until oil becomes expensive enough so that it's worthwhile to do shale mining, to do, what do they call? There's shale mining and there's some other, I can't remember. But anyway, I'm not a petroleum mining person. But when prices and economies and technological developments converge, things that used to be too expensive to extract through whatever techniques become suddenly possible. And that's where North America, especially like Canada, really was able to pull some shale extraction of petroleum, which made for this continent oil supplies becoming sort of advantageous. Like, no more hand waving about, oh, Middle East oil is taking over. OPEC is going to destroy the economy. Yeah, look who's actually doing that. But so getting oil out of the ground, the whole peak oil notion has kind of faded into the background lately because, it actually is possible to extract because of technological developments and the market conditions and prices of things and so on. It's sort of like Bitcoin, right? If Bitcoin continues, and when I say continues, it hasn't really been like on a downward slide continuously. But the last time I looked, it was 66,000 for one Bitcoin, I think it is. So some comments were, if it falls below 60 into the like 50,000-ish range, 50 to 60, it will no longer, because of the way mining has evolved, it will no longer be financially viable to mine Bitcoin if it falls below some threshold. So when it was 100,000 or 70, above 75, I can't remember if it ever reached, it reached 100, I think, right? Not a cryptocurrency person. But when it was valuable enough, people could become innovative to develop faster mining schemes, develop ASICs and so on. But if it becomes less financially beneficial or economically viable, then it's like, well, we're not going to do it. I don't know what happens to Bitcoin at that point. But same with oil or natural resources in general. If it becomes cheap enough, then it actually works out better if we do our mining and drilling in the Gulf or in wherever the shale was in Canada or wherever. It's not. Is it shale or is it? I can't remember the term for American oil drilling in the United States. Do I have a U.S. domestic oil drilling methods? Rotary drilling, directional drilling. I know the hydraulic fracking. Hydraulic fracturing, they've been able to do it, I think, much more safely. I'll put that in big quotes. So, and then they do these horizontal drilling schemes so that they drill, instead of drilling for depth, they drill for distance, which is bizarre. So they instead of blowing up entire plots of land, I think they do this horizontal hydraulic fracturing method so they can extract the oil without completely destroying the place. I don't know. If somebody wants to argue that, you probably know more about this than me. But drilling for oil is a fascinating thing. Movies have been made about it and so on. Big fires have erupted from drilling sites and so on. But I haven't even touched on the political party thing yet. So political parties and the dereliction of duty. I said duty. Like, for example, our Congress, because they are completely and totally beholden for whatever reason, they're cowed to the Donald Trump administration. So they don't really do anything. The people misuse the co-equal branches of government, but not truly the correct term. Co-equal sounds good because of checks and balances, but Article 1 of the Constitution lays out the Congress. Why? Because the government, the republic, is constructed of representatives of the people, right? We the people. The whole unitary executive concept, they should be like a CEO of a company. Well, companies also have boards of directors. A board of directors, for example. A board of directors can fire the CEO. And strangely enough, Congress can fire, quote unquote, fire the president through the impeachment process, the impeachment and conviction and removal from office political process, right? So, but because that is so political, a Congress that has completely abdicated any of its oversight, any of its congressional power and so on to the sitting president becomes completely ineffectual. And when they have the majority, then they basically shut off the Congress. It's like a bypass. And so then the executive branch can do far too much stuff. And that's been happening over decades. As it happens, the second administration of the Trump family, the mob family, has been taking advantage of every weakness they can find. They're sort of like 0-day exploits. That's what their entire the what do you call it? Project 2025 is built on. Hey, we have some really awful ideas, and here's how we're going to exploit bugs in the system to make them happen. But make no mistake, Article 1 defines the Congress because the Congress is supposed to run the country on behalf of the people. And Article 2 describes the executive. The executive is supposed to do, some people say do the bidding of Congress. But the president, even though the president is elected by the Electoral College, but as representatives of the voting population, the electorate, the president is supposed to execute the laws, the acts, the items that have been voted on by the Congress as representatives of the people, because we are a republic or a democratic republic, but we're a republic. We don't need to argue that we're a representative democracy. So you vote your district, gerrymandering aside, your district elects a congressional representative every 2 years. They sit in the Congress. They vote on things on your behalf. The Senate is a broken system, the Great Compromise, right? So the Senate is broken. So is the Electoral College. Mitch McConnell from Kentucky represents, like the total number, half of the population of Kentucky. Yet a senator from California, which is the most populous state in the country, has as much voting power. And Mitch McConnell, when he was the majority leader in the Senate, now he's just a senator, and I believe he's not running again, finally. So he has so much more power in that role, even though he represents a tiny fraction of the senator from California, of one of the two senators. So the Senate itself was an interesting idea when population was spread around, and it was sort of like, oh, we don't want to have some of the quote unquote bigger states overpower the smaller states. So they constructed a system where it's the exact opposite. So, a population of 2 people the census applies to the House of Representatives and how districts how state populations are used to determine how many representatives they have in the Congress. And then the districts are adjusted accordingly and so on. But the Senate, you just get 2. It doesn't really matter. So if your population of South Dakota or whatever, North Dakota, what is the least populous state? The least populous U.S. state is Wyoming. Total estimated population of 588,753 people. That is approximately the population of Las Vegas. So the Las Vegas population, so 588,000, we'll call it, 588. That's an estimate for now. The population based on the 2020 census was 576,000. So somewhere in there. And the population of Las Vegas. And it's interesting when I say population of Las Vegas, it jumps immediately to Las Vegas, Nevada, even though there's a Las Vegas, New Mexico, and there are other similar places. So the 2026 population estimate of Las Vegas is 694,000. For some reason, I thought it was 577,000. 694,000. Where did I get 577? Oh, no, okay. 694. That is a big jump. Do they have... No. The city population estimate in 2020 for the census was also 641. I'm sorry, it was not 577. So it was also above 600,000. So, too many numbers floating around in my head. Anyway, so Wyoming is a little bit smaller by 100,000 people than the city of Las Vegas, yet Nevada gets just as many senators as Wyoming. So there you go. So I was on the topic of Lincoln being the most popular president. I personally think it's George Washington. He was not an exceptional military general, even though we won. Good for him. Good for us. He had to pull a lot of things together on the fly. So I've taken a look at documentaries and I've read some things about the early days of our government. He was certainly educated, not necessarily the shining star, but a star nonetheless. So for me, there are two, well, there are three main reasons that I would say George Washington is the best president. Anyway, number one, on two occasions he handed over power when he really didn't need to. I think that nobody would have complained if he maintained control of the military, for example. So when the Revolutionary War had come to an end, he presented the military to the Congress, and I cannot remember the exact circumstances, but he essentially stepped down, said, well, here's your military, guys. They're all yours. So he could have maintained power and possibly made some ovations to like create a military government, or to play a more military role in how the country was forming in a post-revolutionary state as it was. So that's first time. Second time, he served 2 terms as the first president of the United States, and then he declared himself done. There were no term limits at the time, so he could have just continued to run, and he certainly, probably everybody was reasonably happy. Probably could have served as many terms as he wanted to, but decided that 2 was a good number. After Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, served almost 4 terms, that was when there was maybe we need to have a term limit. 2 terms. And even the 2-term question is poorly defined, and that's where you get the, we have some plans, and maybe we can run again. And this is where the dereliction of duty stuff comes in, because a Congress should be saying, no, this is the way the laws are. And then if the Supreme Court would actually Supreme Court, then they would say, yeah, that's pretty clear. It's 2 terms. But instead we have this ridiculous, this is essentially, there are bugs in the system that you guys have decided not to fix. So we're going to exploit all of them. And hopefully it will be a learning experience. But we end up with this left-right alignment problem, where neither political party, and by the way, political parties are not necessarily political ideologies. I was listening to a piece of a D.L. Hughley, he's a comedian, podcast earlier, like an hour ago, 2 hours ago. And he was saying, the Republicans, Lincoln, the party of Lincoln. Oh, I didn't finish my George Washington thing. The third thing he did was, so he served his 2 terms and then he stepped down. The third thing he did was make a correct observation, which is why it's relevant to this, that the formation of political parties would ultimately be a problem. It's not a quote, but because he was sort of non-denominational, he was just, I'm first. What do I know? And he did all this without any prior knowledge or experience, right? He had to sort of set the tone for the presidency. So I think he did a lot of, he was a guy. He was a human, mortal, with failings. But given the circumstance, I think he did a lot of the right things to set that tone, that all of that has been undone now and over the years, not just in the last year. So there's just been a steady decline of a lack of interest, a lack of awareness, both from the electorate side and from people elected into office who don't really know how the government works. They get the job and they're like, all right, I'm in. Now I have to start trying to raise money for my reelection. Do you know the Constitution at all? I rest my coffee on a document. Is it that? So the political parties and the dereliction of duty is basically, I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat. I got to do what my party tells me. We got to be all in on being against them. And so then you get deadlocks, you get, stupid negotiated, like, okay, everybody wins except for our voters. So the dereliction of duty part has been no more pronounced than it has been over the last year, but really it's just getting worse. It's not like it went from like, oh yes, this is a completely functional Congress, to somebody flipped a switch to dysfunctional. Whoops. And then the insane corruption part, where like, what is going on? How do people flip out about what's his name? What's Biden's son's name? Hunter Biden's laptop, right? His laptop and the deal with the Ukraine with the natural gas, whatever, and trading on his name and stuff. And now, like, if you take all of the corruption of all previous presidential administrations, doesn't hold a can. I saw some number that Trump or possibly the Trump family businesses, put that in quotes, has made something like $6.9 billion from this presidency so far. Kind of outlandish. So, and yet people say, well, he's doing such a good job. Yeah. Let's see how much you have to spend on gasoline in the coming months. But the eggs are cheap. That's the important part. So the insane corruption has become this thing that's only abstracted away. You can find, if you look for it, a collection of, like accounting of corrupt dealings, profiteering from various, pay for play government, whether it's domestic with the tech sector or globally with tariff negotiations, which are ridiculous in themselves, and anything that has involved any sort of play on American hegemony, U.S. hegemony, has been like, oh, you want me to do you a favor? You better send me a couple of Trump coins or give me an airplane or whatever it is. So it's outlandish. So I think my personal view, there should be a shift from left and right, so I was going to say D.L. Hughley was talking about how the Republican Party basically undid slavery in the United States, which is arguably true. But then to say that Republicans today are the party of Lincoln would be pretty much false. And there's been a whole bunch of Dixie Democrats and the Southern strategy and all this other game playing with messaging versus actual intent of different political parties. So when you think about it, political parties are themselves businesses. They're in the business of affecting change through getting their candidates elected. So if you're in the party, you are playing for that team. That team may have a strategy that's like, well, we're not going to really stick with completely left-leaning strategies. Being liberal is not the way to get elected for our party at this time. We are here to win, not to be honest. Same goes for the GOP, the grand old party, the Republican Party. Same thing, right? So they can switch places. They can be the horseshoe, right? Oh, the left and the right come together because the horseshoe is bent, right? As is American politics. So, what's the difference between the left and the right? It's the color of the ties that they wear, basically. So the real concern should be the wealth inequality and what is the government doing for the people that live here. I come down on the side of like, hey, if you don't have any people, then you don't really have anything to govern anyway. So if you're going to let people die, if you're going to exchange like the current news cycle, it's going to be Friday. So now's a good time to tell people, oh yeah, like Trump came out and said, oh, we can't pay for daycare anymore because we have a war to fight. So we'll leave that to the states. And then, and Medicare and Medicaid too, like, is he setting the stage for pulling the plug on these medical programs? Well, if people start dying, and that's already a USAID problem on a global scale, but if you turn away from your domestic society by saying, yeah, we're not going to look out for you anymore, all the promises made are not promises kept, but just at a fundamental level, right? Like we have a population of 330 million. I think I looked this up and it was 341 U.S. population. 342 million estimated population from the census was 331 million. So you can look at domestic collapse rates. The replacement rate is 2.1 children per couple. So you got to have you got to replace each parent plus 0.1 for not making it to the next phase, the next round of replacement, right? So if you had 100% health and wellness and people did not lose their lives to accidents and untimely death in general, then you wouldn't need the 0.1, you would just have 2. So 2.1 accounts for people leaving the population pool of reproducing humans before they have a chance to actually reproduce. So 2.1 children per couple. So if you don't do that, then your population will shrink. So our population is still growing, but not very fast. So I don't know what the current estimated replacement rate is. Of course, you'd have to look at the aggregate rate, not the instantaneous rate. U.S. birth rate 2025. the birth rate dropped to 11.99 per 1,000 people. Yeah, I don't know. They're not totally like, they refer to the 2.1 births. They say per woman, but it's per. That's the two comes from the fact that you basically need two people. But I suppose women are still having the babies, so that's good. Good for now. So 11.99 per 1,000 people. That's that's less than obviously less than 2.1. So if you divide 500, 12 divided by 500. Yeah, that can't be right. So they call it the fertility rate, but it's the replacement rate, right? Same thing. So if you hear those two numbers, and what's his name? Let's see what the John Hopkins says. The birth rate. So they call it the fertility rate. So keep that in mind. Total fertility rate, and the national birth data on mothers ages 15 to 44. And that's where they calculate the total fertility rate from. In 2020, it was 1.64. That's pretty low. So your population will decline. That's just the way math works. Between 1959 and 1987, the fertility rate was somewhere between 2.0 and 2.24. So 2.1 replacement. So if you're at 2.24, you're going to start growing your population. So it's kind of interesting. That's a global story, though, so not just in America. But anyway, so that there are more people in the bottom, not on the left or the right, but the bottom of it, as in you don't have enough money to have kids, or whatever the case, right? You're not economically secure. You're not financially stable. You don't have a positive outlook. Your consumer sentiment is low, all that kind of stuff. And you are in the bottom of the wealth pool, right? So what is it? Like 8 people have as much wealth as the bottom 50% or something. Because and this is a problem with like capitalism in general. Without regulation, you will tend to have capital flow to one side of the pool. So that's just the nature of the beast. So that's why capitalism does require regulation to prevent that, to maintain some equality, some protections. You get antitrust laws, for example. Why do Republicans want to have less of that? And why are all the tech bros, all the billionaires, very supportive of Republicans? We don't want taxes. We want to have taxes that benefit the trickle-down economy concept, so that the wealthy will somehow spend in support of the rest of the population and build up economic interests and so on. It doesn't really end up being true. So yeah, top versus bottom should be where people go, you know what? The two political parties are essentially the same. People who say, oh, I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat. Well, but you're supporting the business of politics, the companies that are the Democratic National Committee, the Republican National Committee, but you're not so interested in the policies. I just can never vote for a Republican, or I can never vote for a Democrat. Well, you have to look at what they actually are trying to pursue and how they fit into the Congress, which is a collection of inputs from the people of the country to try to arrive at something. And lately it has been, how much more corruption can we hand over to the executive branch? But I personally am leaning more towards a top-bottom. So you should just be and this sounds Marxist, but I think Marx has some really bizarre ideas. I will say I have not yet read Das Kapital, but I do have the book. So it's in the list that I'm going to get to it. It's a substantial read, but and Karl Marx was a little bit of a nut. So I don't believe in the Marxist philosophy of like the proletariat taking over and the workers running the show. The workers would never come up with Google or Amazon. The workers would not invent a viable business around artificial intelligence today, or around space and things. So you really do need to have visionary leadership. You got to have somebody who's going to come up with the plan and get it funded and pay people. And then there's the whole, you're exchanging your labor for the profit that the the person, like, that's unfair, and all the profit should go to the workers and things. Like, that still doesn't work when you zoom out a little bit and you're like, well, it wasn't magic, and it certainly wasn't a coordinated proletariat that is able to accomplish things. So you do need leadership, and I think that is worth something. But either way, the bourgeois versus the proletariat is not Marxism, but that taken from the Marxist presentations, the bourgeois versus the proletariat really is something to take a serious look at. Assuming, personally, I don't think we should be celebrating a 250th birthday. We should be considering how we might support the first birthday of whatever comes after what we have now, because it's not really good, but we'll see. I wanted to comment on the short-term technology shortages. The AI business model is circular and broken. There's a startup here in Vegas called TensorWave. They got accolades for being like the best funded startup in Nevada. They received, I think it was $100 million investment from AMD, because they're a cloud AI data center, compute services, pick your terms, company that is exclusively AMD. So all of their parts in their data centers, and they're in 2 locations in the eastern part of the country. So they're not based in Nevada, which is good. Data centers need water and they need power, and we don't have enough of either, really. So $100 million investment from AMD. And what did they use that AMD investment for? To purchase AMD hardware. So that's a circular component of their funding story. So AMD gave them hardware, right? Okay, good for them. And then they get touted as like a development partner. You can get some free time during a developer evaluation period, and so you'll get some tokens or hours or megawatts or however they break it down. And you will probably be using the TensorWave servers or wherever else, I don't know. And so because of all the hype around these circular economies, and NVIDIA, of course, has benefited substantially from this. The Microsoft investment in OpenAI was in a lot of Azure compute credits. So OpenAI is able to use Azure cloud services through this investment, but it wasn't really cash. So that's another thing where you're like, well, we count it as cash, but it's not really cash. And we count it as sales booked, but it's not really sales, because it's really a handshake. And like, we're going to just give, it's like shipping your hard drives to a container in the parking lot, famously. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you should look that up. Shipping bricks in boxes so you could make your quarter. Oh, I was shipped a brick. Oh, well, now that the quarter is over and we've reported all of our numbers, let's get you that replacement part, if they even do that. So we're memory prices for modern systems called DDR5, double data rate 5, version 5. So it's a particular memory technology. Those prices have gone up hundreds of %. So it's becoming outlandish. If you're going to build your own computer, forget about it. If you're going to buy a computer, because companies can benefit from economies of scale, they probably have a stockpile of memory that they already purchased, or memory futures, right? They have options to buy, perhaps, or so they've invested in some way in a future inventory to build their systems for their customers. But that will run out, and then they'll be subject to the same ridiculous prices. Same goes with cell phones, same goes with your game console, same goes with your TV, with your tablet, with whatever. So you're going to see this. And cars, right? Cars have memory. They have computers on board, especially self-driving or allegedly self-driving vehicles. So all these things, and the same is going for solid state drives and even classic rust hard drives, right? Metal, spinning metal with iron oxide on them. So the prices of things are going to be ridiculous unless this bubble bursts and suddenly there might be a big giant crash. So there's going to be a lot of instability. And you look at the war in Iran, war in quotes, because everybody's looking at the Strait of Hormuz and gasoline. But if you also look for LNG, liquid natural gas, that is also going to come up short. I think it's a greater percentage than 20%, whatever that number really is. 20% comes from the Strait of Hormuz for petroleum. But what about LNG, which is used for not only energy, right? Natural gas powered engines and so on, but also is used in a process to create fertilizers for food production, right? Agriculture. So potassium leaning products, and I cannot remember which one is derived from LNG, but because there's less LNG, there's going to be less fertilizer. The cost of fertilizer is going up, so the cost of the next season of crops might be increased. So our inflation on food supply is yet to be fully encountered, not to mention tariffs on any food supply that's imported. And then, so LNG for energy and food production, agriculture, thanks to fertilizer. And then there's helium, which I think also is part of the LNG, liquid natural gas, extraction and processing and so on. So you end up with a lot of helium. And if you can get like semiconductor grade helium, which is even more pure than medical grade helium, if there is such a thing, it's not the stuff you inhale from a balloon. It's super duper clean, right? No, what do you call it? No contaminants in the helium, right? It's, 5 nines pure helium. They use that in semiconductor processes to remove oxygen, to test sealed enclosures for some of the processes of the manufacturing process of semiconductors, right? So completely clean helium is an essential component of that process. And helium is not storable for infinity because it boils off. So any company, any semiconductor fabrication facility that has helium stored can't hold on to it forever. So there is a requirement that helium be available. And now that helium is not going to be as available. So you're going to start seeing this impact production of chips at TSMC, at Broadcom, maybe at Intel fabs. So watch for a sudden increase in pricing or decrease in availability of supply of chips, because most semiconductor production requires helium, just one of the many inputs on the manufacturing side. So all of this stuff is going to drive up prices of pretty much everything. So that's going to be interesting. Startups versus small business and your local ecosystem. I've talked about this in the Cafe Genius Impresarios audio program. Like I said, we'll talk about the K-shaped economy of Vegas. And then we'll talk about so I already did an episode last week on the difference between a startup community or a community versus an ecosystem, right? People use those terms interchangeably, which I believe is incorrect. And like one ecosystem can support multiple communities, but not the other way around, for example. So people will play fast and loose with the term ecosystem. Oh, we're building an ecosystem of developers. Not really. That's not really how that works. So if you're going to maintain the analog against biological systems, you can have an ecosystem like a savanna or a rainforest or a desert, and you can have communities of animals and plant life and so on that coexist, or maybe they are competitors, maybe they are predator-prey relations, maybe they have a symbiotic relationship, but they work within the ecosystem. And so your community of coyotes and your community of humans may intersect in negative ways sometimes, but you're still in the same ecosystem. So you can't really use those terms interchangeably, which is often the case when you talk to people that are in we're startup community builders, or we're economic development professionals that are, trying to drive a startup friendly agenda. So for next week, I will do an episode on there's a nonprofit called America the Entrepreneurial, and there's a movement called Right to Start. And so Nevada is somehow related to these. And I know the Washoe County has embraced this stuff a little bit more proactively than has Clark County or Las Vegas is. We'll see how that turns out. Whether people really can. So America the Entrepreneurial I think they take the approach that I actually do, which is that entrepreneurs can be in a startup mode, which you can probably typify as a growth-oriented pursuit, right? Oh, I'm going to build a startup. I'll eventually get some investment. We'll build up our revenue. We'll pay off the investors, and we'll sell, or we'll grow into a larger company. So you'll either sell off to pay off your investors. So an exit. You'll continue to grow the business into something like a Google or an Apple, right? Those were both startups at a time, many, many years ago. Apple was 74 Or was that just when the Apple One came out? I can't remember. So you can take your startup and turn it into a business, or you can start a small business. So a small business like, oh, I'm going to open up a bookshop or a restaurant. Those are not startups, but I would contend that there are some aspects of them. So if you just divorce the terminology and the forward-looking goals, the general notion, they're pretty close, right? There are differences, and the differences should be highlighted and they should be the focus of different types of effort in different areas based on what your ecosystem has to offer. But I think saying, "Oh, you're not doing a startup. You have a small business. You have a lifestyle business." I think that's dismissive, especially if you're trying to develop the ecosystem, like trying to. You can't change some things about an ecosystem, but if you're trying to get local regulation and infrastructure in place, those are the kinds of things you can change. If you want to attract capital, you can't really change that so much as making it more appealing. So you can't lobby for, hey, bring more of your money here and invest it. That just sort of comes with the territory, if there's territory, right? Like, ooh, this looks like a good place to invest more money. That will become apparent. That's an emergent property, really. Talent pool, well, you can try to get more education and you can try to import talent if you want to gentrify faster. So all these things are there. There's a systems that people will sometimes mistreat as though they are manipulatable, but I would contend that they are not. And so communities are more manipulatable if you're going to do that. So startups and small businesses, they're not the same. Well, they're kind of the same. They are also kind of different. So I think to be completely dismissive out the gate is a mistake. And if everybody has to share the ecosystem, I always talk about the entrepreneurial innovator or innovative, entrepreneurial innovator, the entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem. I can't remember what I have dubbed it. You can start a small business. You can be entrepreneurial. The term entrepreneur comes from, it's a French term from the 1700s, I think it is. It's someone who converts capital to profit, or tries to, with less risk aversion. So they take bigger swings with initial investment, try to turn into more money. So there's nothing like, oh, you have to be starting a growth startup to turn, to make $1 billion in 7 years, whatever the unicorn definition is. You could be an entrepreneur and create the next Google, or you can be an entrepreneur and create the next cool bookshop in your neighborhood, right? So to me, being entrepreneurial versus what you're trying to pursue and how, entrepreneurs are at the core similar personalities. So I think it's too easy to be dismissive and to try to classify these efforts and the people that are pursuing them and so on. So it'll be interesting. So we keep talking about that in the Cafe Genius Impresario's audio program. I think what you end up with is people staying confused by ignoring the connections between the different things that they don't understand, the events, the scenarios, the people, the announcements, the statements, the abstractions. And I think this is something where the news reporting lets people down because they're very abstract. They don't report on concrete events, details, and then the relationship between an event today and an event from 5 years ago or 1 year ago, or how things are interrelated, the interconnectedness of all things. So I think there really needs to be an overhaul. We need to really apply modernity and the technology we have at our disposal. We're going to end up getting more AI generated news reporting. The experiments so far have not been good, not been popular, and I cannot remember which company it was. It was not, it wasn't the Daily Beast. It was I think it starts with a B. They were having some financial difficulties. Not the Daily Beast. Okay, let me see. No, they don't have the name of the company. It starts with a B. I'm totally not finding it. Oh, wait, here we go. Maybe. Fake reporters, no. Fake freelancers, fabricated sources, AI generated opinions. No. Bogus summaries. That will be a huge problem, I think, when you use AI to summarize news reports. This is something I've considered in our own projects here. It's like, oh, maybe we can pull in multiple sources and do a summary of it. And you're like, but then you're sort of handing over any notion of humanity, of like human, obviously the ethos, but like I care that the presentation of the summary actually matches reality. The Daily Beast. What was the other one? Not Beat. News platform bankrupt. Cumulus? No. National Radio? No. Yeah, Cumulus Media is National Radio. BuzzFeed. That's the one. So BuzzFeed was experimenting with AI generated news content, and they are either going bankrupt or Vice is going bankrupt. BuzzFeed News, problem, dead, or maybe not. Who knows? There may have been an AI generated article I read. So yeah, I think there's so much more opportunity to be connected and to understand connections using modern tools, using AI appropriately, right? To classify things, maybe, but to generate news reporting, probably not. That will be something down the road a little bit more. I mean, AI is still new. OpenAI released ChatGPT, whatever version, the first sort of publicly available. Here, try this out. 3.5 years ago? So it's a little bit early to be turning in the keys and calling it a day, right? Nope, AI is going to do everything for us. Like, did a AI generate that announcement? So, yeah, I think people, because those connections, because the cause and effect, causality, correlation, nobody is considering like when this happened, the outcome. And this is where you get political like assignment of blame. Like, hey, you're the new president. Well, the current situation is based on the previous president. Unless it's good news, then it's me. So if you enter office as the president, even though really the Congress should take more responsibility for some of these things, but the president, if the economy is good, well, this is me. And you're like, well, the economy was kind of doing its thing before you got into office. But if it's bad, of course, you blame your predecessor. So because people don't understand the connection between economies, decisions, momentum, delay, right? A decision made 2 years ago is finally changing the landscape today. But unfortunately, a new person has been sworn in. And so they take credit for the improvement, not anyway. So I think not understanding the implications of decisions over time and the interconnectedness of them is a growing weakness that can lead to, governments just saying, well, whatever you think doesn't really matter. We're in charge. You just voted. Now sit down. I'm going to end it soon because this, I think, is one of the longest episodes of this audio program I've recorded. I have a comment on social networks. I've been way, way, way under engaged with social network platforms, social media platforms, whatever. I consume YouTube videos. I have found that commenting on them is very, very, very rarely worth the effort. Like essentially 0% of the time. I'm not interested in being a part of some faux community in YouTube comments on a video channel. Some content creators creating their content, great. But it's just not worth commenting. Similarly, I've stopped using Facebook and Instagram and all these things. Would I consider using like a ActivityPub based image sharing like PixelFed, which is a decentralized Instagram style of application? I don't know if I care that much anymore. But for promoting businesses, for doing customer outreach, promotion of events or products and things, that's what these platforms are becoming. Like I honestly think if I were going to use some sort of a central or decentralized, but some sort of an online platform to share photos or whatever, I think a mailing list, like a family newsletter, those could make a comeback. A friend group, a professional, discussion forum, and Discord became popular for that for a while, but Discord kind of sucks now. But there are all manner of central and decentralized platforms, open source, self-hosted, small fee, funded by advertising, there are so many of these that going with the Twitter and the Facebook and the big, like, we're making money on you and then we're also selling your personal data and whatnot. I don't think that makes sense anymore. But of course, there's so much momentum behind this thinking that what they call the change cost is too high, because all my friends use Facebook. Then, like, well, I gave all my friends my email address, and if I never hear from them, now we know. No, I need to have a company between us. I need a chaperone named Meta. Mark Zuckerberg has to be our go-between. Is ridiculous. Same with Twitter, same with Blue Sky. And even I'm kind of running out of steam on the Mastodons and whatnot. Now, Mastodon could be useful. I personally think there should be far more servers than there are. So I think I've mentioned the Mastodon.Vegas plan for our information sharing platform. So that would be a component where a feed platform like that is part of an overall infrastructure of structured information sharing, taking advantage of semantic markup and structured data, right? Which benefits AI for better or worse. But moving away from the newspaper style of reporting and moving more towards an analytical information sharing platform that can present relationships, that can present things on a timeline or on a map. The example I always give is habitat encroachment. I mentioned coyotes and humans, right? If those interactions are taking place closer to the middle of where the humans are because of a water shortage, which leads to a food shortage, which leads to animals coming into town because, hey, there's no more food where I live, so I'm going to go where you live. Look at all this food that's just running around in people's backyards. That really does happen. Luckily, not too often, but that could change. So keeping track of this in a public way. The other one is sometimes you'll see dangerous intersections or dangerous parts of roadways where people are being struck by vehicles. Usually there has to be an injury or fatality. But in my mind, we should be collecting information about unsafe intersections and parts of roadways and sidewalks and whatnot. Because if a near miss is not counted, then there could be lots of near misses that will eventually become injuries or fatalities. But we should be able to take note of these locations before that happens. And you could basically enable a more aggressive data capture platform so that people can report these things in a useful way. So social networks can be people talking about what they had for lunch, right? Back in the old days. Or it could be legitimate information sharing in a structured way so you know where the information came from. It could be, you could have an entire Mastodon server based on bus routes, right? So each bus has its own account and you can follow them. And if you're using a decentralized platform, I might want to follow the CX bus on RTC SNV's Mastodon server. Then I can find out when the schedule changes or where the bus is or, however that information could be shared usefully. But if you use these platforms using standard connections, whatnot, you can actually interface with people using data, and maybe that leaves more real life interaction. What I've personally found, especially with LinkedIn now, I used to have when I first joined LinkedIn in 2003, seriously, August of 2003, they launched in May. I used to say, I'm only going to connect with people on LinkedIn if I know them personally, if I've worked with them, if I've met them in person. I rarely connect with people that I actually know anymore because who cares? So it should be more useful to connect with people in similarly aligned professions or working for agencies or working on particular projects. What you end up with is a connection that has no personality behind it. There's no humanity. So I'm connected to the superintendent of the Clark County School District. That doesn't mean that person has anything to do with the ideas and objectives that we might have in common. We don't really know those things because we don't know each other. So there's not really an honest connection. It's a mechanical checkbox, right? Oh, yes, we are connected on LinkedIn, but I will never be involved with or supportive of or interactive with anything in either direction, right? So who cares? While we have this faux network. So networks in real life are very different. I think platform networks, social graph, right? Who's connected to whom? I think those could be more useful if people treated human interactions as the important part and the platform connections as the informative part. So in other words, instead of saying, who do I know that works for a particular company? Do I know anyone who knows anyone? Blah, blah, blah. There should be a return to humanity and use the network connections to improve those communication channels. So, who do I know personally who I've actually kept, who do I know from college or a previous work experience who would know someone who works at this other company where I'm trying to get a job or I'm trying to communicate about a project. So that personal referral has given way to, hey, who in my community of a million people who don't know me at all knows a person? Oh, can you recommend me? So all the personal recommendations, personal introductions have lost their value and lost their meaning because social networking and social media have become faceless username connections, not human connections. And I think that's a huge problem. Somebody should change that. I'm all for more of a local, in-person based cohort of people who know each other, the development of an asset map if you want to know who's doing what. So the asset map and the mixture of something like an asset map and something like personal goals and achievements and friend groups and so on, those all become intermingled on a platform like LinkedIn, which is becoming more and more garbage. It's Instagram, but worse. So yeah, I'd like to see that go away or at least fall back a little bit and become a tool and not something that there are people that post on LinkedIn like, oh, I posted every day on LinkedIn for 3 years and here's how crazy I've become. And by the way, I see some of those. It's usually because women are making a killing on LinkedIn. They're brand ambassadors, brand developers, profile consultants. So they basically want to build up your follower account on LinkedIn. So when you look at their accounts, they are, and first of all, they all know each other. I'm not trying to be like they are the enemy or anything, but there's groups of people who kind of form little circles of connection. So then they cross post because when you're commenting and engaging people's posts, that elevates their standing in the algorithm. So it's a matter of cross promotion and cross support. So that part's fine. That's true of food trucks too. So it's not it's a question of women on Instagram. LinkedIn. It's a question of how these network platforms work. You amplify by engagement. So if you want to be supportive of a group, of a cohort, of people with similar business interests or whatever the case is. So, but you'll see these, they cross promote each other and so on. And when you look at the accounts of women in particular, but it's true of men too. But I'm seeing a tremendous number of Instagram selfie style streams of posts. Like every single post will be, here's me having coffee. Here's me with my laptop. Here's me at the beach. Here's me outside. Here's me inside. Here's me walking to, and here's me walking from. So you start to say, what is LinkedIn becoming? Depends on who you're following. And in order to get some pieces of information, you must be following the correct people because of the way the algorithm boosts stuff and so on. So essentially these networks are setting the agenda for how people interact. Maybe it's following Conway's Law. Don't know. I don't know if that's really true anymore. But I'm becoming more and more a fan of getting back to actual human interaction. Like I should not be connected with you on a network where you don't care and then I don't care because you don't care. Then we shouldn't be connected. If you're never going to enable some sort of communication by responding, or you're not going to do some sort of a referral, like, oh yeah, I know somebody and I did this with our Smarter Smart City Challenge. I said, hey, do any administrators know who I should talk to about getting the work? Not a single response. So it's not worth being connected to people who don't care. So knowing people automatically kind of boosts in your own human algorithm. Like, oh, I know this person. I would like to see them succeed. And I know they're trying to accomplish something that will ultimately be good for a lot of people, including people that I would like to succeed that are not that person, other people. So when there's that human connection, which is completely missing in the modern era, I think you get a more effective use of the connection on these platforms. Right now, it's just am I connected to a robot? Who knows? So I think ultimately it's the undoing of humanity. That seems like a good note to end on. I do have the traditional anything else, but I think I've talked for long enough. So I'm going to leave it here. Thanks for listening as always. And check out the buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo profile page for links to all of my other productions. And until next time, and we never know for sure when that will be. Take care. Bye-bye.